All right, tell him what you told me, Josh.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Tell him what you told me.
Tell them what I told you. What did I tell you?
You opened up
Uh,
tonight and you said,
oh yeah. What I said was that I think that you're referring to is that I've played other Lights Out types games, and most of them are just not presented well at all. They shuffle and like give you random puzzles, and it's just not fun because you have like a certain number of clicks that you're trying to solve it in that it like measures you on. It says you did good or bad, but they're also like give you like here's a 2-click puzzle, here's an 11-click puzzle, here's a whatever, and it's just not presented well at all.
mm,
And this is like really well pieced out into like here's the basic ones and like gives you a way to build concepts and actually like has you actively engage with that process and has the lectures and stuff like that. I thought it was the best um, presentation of Lights Out that I've probably seen before. Because like it's not like it is a bad game or anything. Like the core game of what Lights Out is.
mm-hmm.
It's just that I think that most people who have seen it have seen a terrible presentation of it.
Yeah. But what I was really referring to was the fact that
Oh,
you came on and you said, I did it, which can only mean
I
one
did.
thing. Josh has reached mastery.
Well, yeah. Don't look at that light.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's.
It was like
It's, it's got to be a bug.
it popped up and said now's the time dot dot dot,
Yeah.
and you had a button that said go there, and I clicked it and everything went off the screen and there was like a tiling texture weirdness, and I was like it went on for a few seconds and I was like, did the game just crash? Can I ever play this
Oh,
again? What's happening? Like,
you must have had
and then it
music
started
turned
showing
off.
particles. I had some, but or I had it on, but
Okay. It plays the credit
yeah, I
music.
didn't.
It's got this epic
Yeah, well,
congratulatory.
I was just kind of like, what's happening? And then the particles started coming in. I'm like, okay, okay, I get it. This is credits.
Appreciate it. So let's take a look and just kind of recap and wrap up. Usually, when I do these interviews, feel free to say whatever you want, but I get to poke around in your save file and just see how you played. Uh, usually,
So I can be like, here's what I did, and you're like,
yeah,
never
like
mentioned.
one thing that you didn't have unlocked before was uh, there's a way to display how long. Where is it? That could really be in the version 8, not version 7. But there was a way to display how long you took to solve each puzzle. Let's see.
Okay.
But I don't see that here. Where would that be? Show lines, user shapes. Let's see if this works at all. No. But there's a bug if you do this. Let's type in solve copy. You know you can copy paste in
No,
this.
I didn't know that.
So these are all the
Oh.
puzzles that you took notes with the word solve in the actual note.
Ah,
That was this feature like just broke on me because of these two text
that's
boxes.
cool though. But yeah, most of the time, if I took a note, sometimes I said solve, and sometimes I said solution. I
Hmm.
think I had said solution more often. So if you go back and search solution, there'll probably be a lot more. Well,
Yeah,
some more.
two
Not
two
too
three
much. Yeah.
times, 4 times as many. Yeah, yeah. Let's take a look at your story. So in a roughly, it looks like roughly 14 hours.
Yeah.
Right here, about the 14-hour mark, you reached mastery, which is great. It's faster than basically everybody else, I think.
Oh, really?
I think so. It's quite fast. Even though 14 hours that's no small amount of time, so I appreciate the effort. Just
Yeah.
and then oftentimes I compare stats and kind of look at your stats and try to get a sense of what your journey was like. Some people blind things a lot later. Some people add shapes a lot earlier. But for the most part, a steady climb up. Most people like to solve and perfect as they go along. So these two lines are like
Yeah.
hugging each other. That's common.
That's kind of how I did it. Is um I really didn't want to randomly click everything. I wanted to understand. Like I was like, okay, if I understand the fundamentals, I can always layer onto that. But if I skip over some stuff, it's really going to hurt me later because I have to go back and relearn it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go and do all the puzzles, and when I found some that were hard to remember, I would go into explore mode and practice that specific puzzle and pay attention to how it changed and try some extra permutations of
Mm-hmm.
it to find alternate solutions. And then I would go back and try to blind all of them in that level and then go to the next one basically.
Yeah.
So I could it took a little longer. It took longer to get to the higher levels um in like like if you're looking at over the short term, right? It took me longer to try some of the higher level ones because of that, because I took more time with the lower level stuff. But in the long run, it didn't take more time total, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Daily
I
scores.
try and understand all the pieces first, or be comfortable with them at least. Yeah, it's funny because that daily one gave me a lot of trouble, but now um, it gave me a lot of trouble. But once I started looking at things like you were saying, using hidden shapes,
Mm-hmm.
and also learned a couple more of the really pin plus click solutions,
Yeah.
then I could pretty much solve any of the daily one stuff, even if it was like, oh, here's a 5-click solution to this puzzle, like, or there is this one can be solved with a minimum of 5 clicks. Even if it took me like 10 or 11, I could still solve it. It just maybe wasn't. I wasn't seeing the simple one,
Mm-hmm.
but I could still solve them at least if I back myself into a corner or whatever.
Yeah, your scores on the scramble, it's quite high, quite fast.
Yeah, that one. Which one?
Number
Number two?
daily 2, yeah.
Which one is that?
Take the shapes that you know, but slightly randomize them, and you're supposed to restore them back to the shape.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of trouble with that one. Probably, and the one where you have to create a shape
Mm-hmm.
by like in reverse instead of solving it, you have to create it.
Yeah.
I was decent with that one too. But that's because I spent more time trying to visualize, I think,
Yeah.
how the shapes changed. And I so that's interesting. That would be consistent like with what I spent time on basically. So like daily one would be more about I didn't pay as much attention to the hidden shapes. I was visualizing how a certain click might change the adjacent squares, which helped a lot on 2 and 5,
Mm. Yeah, you unlocked the
I
dailies
guess.
way early and also started doing them early. Some people focus a
Mm.
lot on puzzle mode for many hours before they decide to go to dailies. But I'm like, they're called dailies. Do one a day or something like that. But they're like, no, I'm gonna do puzzle mode.
Mm.
But yeah, I think doing them
I
early helps
was
a lot.
yeah, I really wanted to do puzzle mode. Like it was one of my bigger
Mm,
interests, I guess. But I also like I didn't want to completely ignore the lectures, and I knew that if I didn't prioritize them from early on, I would get to like halfway through the puzzle mode and not have any of the lectures.
mm,
And then as soon as I realized, oh, you're unlocking stuff by doing lectures, I'm like, I really shouldn't put these off.
yeah,
So there's, I tried to breeze through at least like the first 10. I
yeah.
kind of did a lot of them in like one sitting because um, the first 10 or so was like, oh yeah, I know what we're talking about here,
Hmm.
and I know how this works and whatever. So
Yeah. Giving people those unlocks, I was like, well, I gotta get them something. I thought,
no, it was cool. It was cool because it didn't just unlock. It talked about like the concept
mm,
and using it and how it related to brain function and everything. Um, The only thing that was weird is sometimes it would say like you unlocked compass, and I'd be like, "What is that? Where is it?"
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and you get a tutorial for it, but you have to go into records mode to get the tutorial.
yeah. You have to go in the correct mode for the tutorial to even be relevant to show you what to do. So,
Yeah.
explore, puzzle, and records all have different tutorials. And my thoughts.
Some responses is that like skips
This is
or
when, that's when Richard's like, oh, you look stumped. Take a note, or something like that,
oh okay.
and it kind of prompts you to. Um, some people do a lot of the content late, and I think the most interesting part is to see So a lot of times people don't understand how to learn. You obviously are the opposite. But for people who don't either have confidence that they can master a game like this or know how to do it, they oftentimes do a bunch of different things, and then at the end of it, they don't know what contributed to their success. So I like to look at these graphs and see if something spikes. Like, let's say all these lines were flatlined, and then all of a sudden you started doing them like at the 7 hour mark, and then just after the 7 hour mark your scores start going up a lot. You could say that one affected the other and they were strongly correlated or something like that. But seeing the aligning those spikes in the graph is how I try to get some idea of cause and effect. But your graphs, not only, like I said, they start early, but they have these smooth gradual tapers upwards, like no matter what, like almost 45 degrees across every field. Let's see. And I think that says a lot. I think that says a lot to have a more well-rounded approach, like you said before. Just gives you, it pays dividends down the line.
Check and see if like towards like hour 13, 14, if there's some of those spikes, because that's after we talked about the hidden shapes and stuff.
Yeah, let's
And I
see.
started trying to apply that. I felt like there was a jump there.
Let's see your tools then. So, the what's this lime green? Oh, this is the worst part.
Overwatch.
If you isolate it, then the color is like different than what it is down here. Yay, great! But only if you isolate. It's just like, oh, great. Anyway, so your relevant notes became one of your staples. But that's crazy to think that you play for like 2 hours or so, and around the 10 to 12 hour mark, it looks like you did. You wrote a bunch of notes on the 10 to 12 hour mark, and you didn't do a lot of daily challenges, but you did increase your high level puzzle marks only on well, actually those are flatline too for the most part. You did a little bit at the beginning. So it's interesting, like what happened at the 10 to 12 hour mark.
I think a lot of it was just
Puzzle mode.
there are some things that started to that I had like observed already that started to click, and I started to notice relationships between a couple other puzzles, and that's when I went down to like, oh, I wasn't exactly sure I was seeing, but now I know. I think it's this, and I took some notes.
Yeah, kind of like what you said before. At the 10 to 12 hour mark, you started using the flow history tool more, so it went from almost none in this spike right here, which is really interesting.
The flow history does what?
The tool, you started using it.
No, what does that tool do again?
Oh, that's shows you the shapes that you most likely flow into or out of from the current shape on the screen.
Yeah, there were some of them where it's like I didn't use them not because I just gravitated away from them, but more because I wasn't getting that stuck most of the time. And in the later puzzles, I started to get a bit stuck, and I was like, I need to find a way out of this rut. And then you like showed me some of those tools, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize this is quite how that worked. So I'm gonna try to use that.
Yeah.
And then it helped me like that helped me get over those last 4 on the higher level puzzles.
It's interesting too that the spikes aren't overlapping. That one spikes and then the other spikes. So first you did flow history for about an hour, and then you did hidden shapes for about an hour. And like, see this line right here, right when you stopped using flow history, you switched over to hidden shapes. So you're like in a tool mode, which is cool. Like, it's cool to see that. But of course, relevant notes, or no, Click Keeper was this lime green one right here. You used it a lot to get through a huge, like, let's say hump. So let's look at puzzles solved.
Yeah, the Click Keeper
9.
was some of the especially asymmetrical puzzles. Once you get to 10 plus clicks, the Click Keeper is the only way I could find the optimal solution.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because I would just like let me solve pieces of it that I recognize, and then this other piece, and then like I recognized that I was getting a lot of redundant clicks, and Click Keeper helped me see where those were, and then I'm like, let me try it without those redundant clicks, and like, oh, okay, I can see that now. Like, that's the only way I could find some of those.
Yeah, considering that these are the harder puzzles from hour 9 to 10 and a half, it's when you did the latest and biggest spike in terms of puzzles solved. And that correlates
Mm.
very directly with hours 9 to 10 and a half on your click keeper. So you were just like, let's hit it. Right?
Yeah, well, I was actually finding that I had not a lot of trouble tracking the puzzles mentally and figuring out what I was doing before that point. And once I started getting, 8, 9 clicks plus, then it was like, this is a little too much for me to just
Mm-hmm.
track in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like the tools became really useful because earlier on, it I could see what I needed to do, and it was just a matter of memorizing, so that I would just jump into explore mode and play with the shapes and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
after that, it was like I'm not exactly understanding what I'm looking at, and then the tools were super helpful.
That's interesting. You have such a smooth curve. So there's another guy who I think he teaches at the SMU Guildhall Master's Program for Game Development, and he's a teacher and programmer. And he briefly played enLIGHTen, and I actually got a small recording of how he played and how he talked out loud. And I think his approach was very similar to your approach, where took it slow at the beginning, he actively talked about heuristics, and since he was a teacher, he was really good at both explaining his own thoughts and he's smart, so like that helps. But he was
Yeah,
really
yeah,
pinpointing like precise, like I wonder if this is a heuristic, I wonder if this is, I'm gonna keep my eyes out for this, oh maybe this, but that's not necessarily. And he would take his time on even like the 2-click puzzles. Right. so,
yeah.
so that approach reminds me of yours. But I think what's interesting about that is, I think the way both you guys played avoided lots of bumps that other people run into. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I think a lot of that is so I already am very good at learning things.
Mm-hmm.
I find that for one thing, I think when it presented a new concept, I internalize it faster than most people do.
Mm.
And part of it's because maybe that's the way my brain works, and other part of it is like I've learned better tools. So there's maybe some of both things, but like the second part is a lot of it,
Mm.
there. So there's I started thinking about a lot of this stuff about 10 years ago, and I maybe couldn't articulate it all really well at the time, and I've gotten better at it over time too. But it's like I had a handful of things that I tried to get really good at, and I had taken 10 plus years of lessons doing like different types of instruments
Yeah.
and things like that. And I was doing programming classes and art classes and all these things I was trying to get good at in multiple domains. And it was really hard for me. I remember having a moment in my second year of school where I had like a programming class, and then the next class was a math class, and then the one after that was an art class.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really hard to get anything done in the art class because I was like in this like everything has concrete answers.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is like, the mathematical approach to this, and then going to the art class and being like, I can't get anything done in here, and uh, just flipping that switch in my brain. Now I can do that like on a whim, like just like flip, because it's like more a generalized approach the way I think about those types of problems. But having multiple domains like that at a time, I was actually taking private lessons in and trying to get really good at. I started to notice like when I would excel in those things and start to do better than some of my peers, I would notice some habits I had across disciplines that were consistent.
Yep.
So then I was like, okay, well, I know what works, and then like, oh, let me try and learn this new thing. Oh, I can kind of have the same technique, and that
Yeah.
works. And so then, over the following decade past that, I was like, oh, okay, there's actually like research to back all these things up, basically, and it's just something that kind of I learned a lot of it just from exposure and to a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and drawing the parallels between those and seeing like, oh, these higher level concepts apply to all of them basically. So, and then of course just like, let's see how many different things I can learn, and that just kind of it all stacks, you know.
That's crazy. Yeah, I have a very similar experience, and I think working hard in multiple disciplines, having teachers in multiple disciplines, and trying to do well, like doing those back to back or somewhat in a small time frame, really does expose the commonalities between learning one thing versus another. I think I think that's what I love about video games. If people didn't just like pick one game and overplay it too much, or weren't so adverse at trying to get good at multiple games, I think they'd have a very similar experience. Trying to get good at a racing game and a fighting game and a puzzle game and a this and that, like you really do have to stretch yourself, and by learning the different ways people think, play, the different ins and outs and the systems and the rules, you go, oh, like I can see commonalities between learning any of these games, and therefore you can see commonalities between learning anything.
Yeah, yeah. I will say that, you know, that there was a time when I just felt like a freaking alien, you know, because
Mm.
I was like, had this in my head where I feel like, you know, everybody can learn something if like, and some people might learn things faster than others, and there might be some amount of genetics that you can't change,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, everybody can learn anything
Yep.
as long as they apply themselves. So I was like, oh, I would treat other people as like, you can do this, you know,
Yeah.
and then it would just like get to this point where everyone's like, you're doing all this so much stuff, and I'm like, I don't feel like I am, but okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Like, and you know, the older I get to, the more I notice like all those things compounding, and everyone's like, whoa, I can't believe that you're this age because you seem so far ahead, or you seem this or whatever, and I'm like, it's just time spent learning and having the right habits.
Yeah.
Uh, but I will say that y- you're probably like the one person that I've met that is the most like me
Mm.
in that way, where you're curious about a lot of things and you like to learn and you like to talk about the process of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's just like so rare, it seems like.
Yeah. I know that feeling.
You try and talk about these things. It's like people trying to talk about money or anything too. It just gets weird because it's like, oh, you don't talk about that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because there's this like everybody worries about it and everybody has anxiety around it. But if you talk about it, then it's like, now I have to acknowledge that that's there and I don't want to do that. And it's like, you know,
Yeah.
the same thing when you talk about learning techniques, because everyone ties it into this like self-image.
Yep.
And
It's
if
tough.
I admit that I'm bad at this thing, then it means that, you know, what else am I bad at?
Yeah.
How am I inadequate as a person or whatever? And like, in at one point, so recognizing the patterns across things for me like 10 years ago also kind of heavily it happened around the same time as I also like separated the concept of doing well at something from being valuable as a person, basically. So like I took ego out of it completely, so
Yeah.
I could like look at like, here's a music piece I'm practicing, and I would play it and I'm like, man, that was garbage, that sucked. And you say that to some people and they'll be like,
Crushed.
oh, he's saying that I suck.
Yeah.
Like, no, no, no. Like, so I actually had that problem for a little while where I would like refer to like, oh, this is kind of crap, and people would think that I was criticizing them as a person. Like, oh, wait a minute, I have to remember that not everybody is hearing it the way I'm saying it. Like, no, I'm just talking about the thing. I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about the thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Totally.
yeah,
It's tough.
I had a guy tell me once, he was like, that seems like a superpower that you have, that you're able to separate your self-image from the thing that you're doing.
It is
I'm like,
super,
really?
but it's
Yeah.
also a skill. Like,
Right. It is. He was just like, I can't do that. I don't know anybody else who can do that. And I'm like, well, it's learnable.
yeah, yeah. Hmm. Just just taking a look at your the distribution of your hours spent on the game, and I clicked on review mode. So normally people spend more and more time in a review mode as they play harder and harder puzzles, get stumped longer and longer, and then spend more and more time looking at the end result as they continue to play. So but your review mode up to hour 16 is flat. So you barely you barely stayed in that mode at all. It's like everything you needed to review, you felt like you could get either in and out, take a note, and then move on to explore, or you just didn't feel like you needed to stay in that mode. So
Review mode. You mean what? What do you
at the end of every daily challenge or puzzle, it has that mode where it
Oh,
lets you
yeah.
review your stuff.
Yeah. Usually just took a. You'll see it in my notes if you go there. Like
Mhm.
it might have to look through, but I basically went to the part that was problematic and took a note on that.
Yeah, and
And
then
like I had trouble with this shape, and then yeah.
so you had it. You went in there knowing what to extract, and then you got in and out. Other people spend more time there, just kind of reflecting and just running back over their moves. But it sounds like you knew, like even as you got to the end of review mode, you're like, I know I messed up on this. Let me go exactly to that point, take a note, move on, get out. And your time in that mode reflects that. Like you spent so little time in like what is that point? I can't read the number because it's cut off on my screen.
Point. It's like
2-4.
0.24.
Yeah, about a quarter of an hour. That's crazy considering.
Over 14 hours. It's not much.
Yeah, like other people, if you look at other stats, other people's ratio is much higher. Level select is kind of neat. You spent more time looking at the levels than you did reviewing your stuff.
Yeah. Funny.
The cool part about level select is there's a certain part in other people's graphs where it like shoots up, and some people actually study the level select as their study. Like, I want to see how things connect and just think about how concepts flow together, and they just hang out on level select. So sometimes their graphs spike late game when level select becomes like a fully rich feature. Chatting with Richard, once you realize the lectures do a thing, you just powered through them, and then visited them for quizzes every now and then. But that's kind of expected. You didn't spend a lot of time in notes until near the end, which is cool because
You talking about in
the mode, my
like
thoughts.
going into the notes mode?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Most of the time, I got the benefit I needed from just taking the note.
Yep.
And just putting the thought into words, and otherwise it'd be like, oh yeah, I had a thought related to this. What was it? And I'd go look up that thought and just get what I needed, basically.
Yeah, right here, late game notes I think really pay it forward. When you have so many of them, you've seen so many things. You either need to quickly review, quickly refresh, or compare, and that happens. It's most beneficial when there's more things to compare or sift through, and that's why I think you see these two spikes near hour 11 and 13 and a half for you. But then they level off.
Most of that was probably I would hit a puzzle and then I would learn it and memorize it, but then the next day I'd be like, crap, I don't remember that, and I would have a note where I was like, this is the solution. So I would go and review those, because when you had to like get weird asymmetrical puzzles or things like that, like I was just like, what? How do I solve this again? And I go find the note. It's like, oh, click in a T, and then close the worms or whatever kind of stuff, you know, like this made sense.
I had a master player, and she was playing it, and she looked at Explorer mode when she first unlocked it. She's like, Explorer mode? Who the heck would ever spend time in this? This is the worst mode ever. And then somewhere mid to late game, she's like, Explorer mode is the best mode in the game. And
the best part about it is that you can put any shape on the board.
Yeah.
You can practice it and see how it changes. You can scroll through your history.
There's no penalties.
You can remove the whole like pressure to solve in a certain number of clicks.
There's no penalties. Yep. It doesn't. Nothing matters in there but you. But
yeah, you could always learn in the puzzle mode by just clicking more and not worrying about it. But it's easier. You still know, like, oh, but it's judging me at the end.
Yeah. And then you're forced to review it. You're like, I was trying to study. You're like, leave puzzle mode for that.
You're like, cool. I feel great about what I learned here. At the end, it's like, here's a review.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh. Crap.
And it forces you to take a note. And you're like, yeah. So Explorer mode is definitely better for that. Steady increase for different players. You're very much similar to what I've seen in other players, and some players spike, but that's cool too. Daily, I like to see a steady rise on daily, regardless of anyone's rate. Like, this is the blue line for my brother's a little steeper or more shallow, but yours is steeper. But I like to see a nice relatively steady rate because I think that's where you get the most bang for your buck. I've seen some people just spike up with daily because they're trying to grind it out, but you don't get the chance to fan out the experience if you try to shove it all in at the end or whatever.
Yeah, and that's just a few hours there too, so
Yeah.
before it starts trending upward. I think what happened there was I went into daily mode and tried one,
Hmm.
and then I had some trouble with like level 7 plus in daily challenges 1, and I was like, "Oh, I guess I don't understand enough about the game yet, so I'm going to go really learn the early puzzles and then this will make more sense because what I was expecting was like there's daily challenges 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5. Those will
Oh,
be harder than that. But then I didn't realize at first that oh these are just different.
yeah.
So that was like actually all of them are easier than daily 1 for me. So
Yeah.
like yeah, and just like realizing oh these are kind of different approaches. They're not necessarily a um like incremental in terms of the difficulty or whatever.
Hmm. And puzzle mode
And
is,
that's just my bringing experiences from other
yeah.
games and making an assumption.
I think most people understand puzzle mode, and a lot of people like set their eyes on like I'm gonna beat every puzzle. I'm gonna get to ring whatever. And it's cool how giving people a clear, quantifiable value and a number to something allows them to set really easy goals. But for the most part, I think you'll see that the longer people play, the less time, the less benefit they get from working in puzzle mode. Because sure, like they're challenging, and sure it gets to be quite a lot of clicks, but the real powerful takeaways are what thoughts you're building, what heuristics you're nurturing, and what things you're exploring.
Yeah.
Puzzle mode can be a great way to help push you into combinations and puzzles you wouldn't naturally stumble into. But for the most part, if you're not focusing on the learning parts, then you're just anyone can randomly click until they solve it, and then look at Click Keeper, make a note, go back, memorize it. Like anyone can do that. Very simple, basic steps. So I find that
Mm.
I've seen that in a lot of people's stats where puzzle mode, even though they keep putting time to it, becomes less and less effective for reaching enlightenment and
Right,
mastery.
because time doesn't is not a good correlator with like understanding at all. All depends on how you're using the time and the method that you're using.
Yeah, yeah,
If you're just random clicking, eventually lots of time you will get something, but that doesn't mean that you understand it at all. That's why like the whole like 10,000 hours for mastery is kind of a really bad metric because it doesn't actually mean anything. What it was is like we studied this
hmm
many masters and this is on average how many hours they spent, which is like okay, it probably will take a certain amount of hours, but it also doesn't tell you at all how those
the hours are
hours are
spent.
spent.
Yep.
So most people, it's like, okay, well, it's it's getting those numbers by from like real data, right? So it might not be like inaccurate in terms of that, but the way people use that is, oh, I just got to put 10,000 hours into this to master it. It's like, no, not really.
Hmm.
For some people, it might even be less, but it's really about like, you know,
Yeah.
method, things like that. So we also talked about one thing I thought was interesting. I talked about this some before, is the whole like CPTM
Hmm.
model.
Hmm.
Um, and I told you I did like a personality test that
Hmm.
measures big 5 personality traits. So not like the Myers-Briggs one that changes based on your mood, basically, but like it's like real based on real psychology. So um, for it was like so first of all like conscientiousness, which corresponds to like being able to like slog through and do dutiful work basically, and so like work ethic, industriousness,
Hmm.
that type of stuff, like oh feeling guilty for not getting things done. I'm in the 91st percentile for that, which is really high, but in combination with other traits like openness, which correlates to like um, curiosity about things,
Hmm.
which is really important, obviously, for the CPTM
Yeah.
model. I'm like 96th percentile for that,
Hmm.
which is like
Even higher.
crazy high.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And so like not only am I high in that, but basically across 3 of the 5 personality dimensions, I'm 90 plus
Hmm.
in. So it's like I was like 91st percentile for extroversion,
Extroversion.
has to do with positive emotion, or let's see, what was it?
Gain.
Enthusiasm, assertiveness, those types of things.
That's interesting.
Openness. It also is related to like intellect, which is interest in abstract ideas, which I was 94 in that. Or aesthetics, basically, interest in beauty and art and things like that. Yeah, really high. And then the other things like neuroticism, so like negative emotion and anxiety and things like that. Like I was like 22. So it's basically like all of the things that wouldn't be very conducive to learning. I'm really high in. So some of this is like making more sense because I've always known for like my whole life, basically, right, that could learn things faster than some other people, and a lot of that is because just getting started with the curiosity and actually asking questions. How does this work? How does this like? And like, I'm more likely to do that because of my personality. Is what this is saying. So
yeah,
which I think is interesting.
Comparing the mastery curves, these are some of my brother's stats, but he was like, at some point, I don't remember when his numbers, when these stats were, but it was like 7 years ago or something more. But he was playing like a little bit every morning and just doing different puzzles. And he doesn't really play a lot of puzzle games like primarily. That's like my thing. So he was just taking it easy and using it like a warm up every morning. But it's interesting to look at some of his stats and where he would, for like 10 hours, 5 hours, would plateau in mastery. But then get a little incremental bump and then like stay there and then get a bump and then like steadily rise. It's interesting to see and just kind of even anecdotally compare an experience like that with what you were experiencing, where it's in a much shorter time frame, you had much bigger rises, and something about, I mean, I know the game is not like fine tuned, right? I do realize if you just power through the lectures, your enlightenment goes up way high, and then yada yada. There's ways to either pump up your stats or have an uneven growth pattern. But for the most part, just looking at the stats, one of my early theories was like, yeah, you can't reach mastery until you understand, until you reach enlightenment. And what I was trying to do with that was, do you know how to learn? Then you're probably going to be wasting a lot of your effort, and that wasted effort is going to reflect in low level competency, which is what I was measuring with mastery. And I was really trying to bring home to people, understanding what's going on in your head, understanding the process is like the key that unlocks your ability. And it's not genetics, and it's not talent, and it's not luck. It's like this precedes that, and they should always, maybe there would be some kind of pattern I could extract by looking at one.
Like, there's things like IQ, right? That really what that is going to affect is how quickly you assimilate information into long-term memory. But that doesn't, there's so many other things that happen besides just that are important. So you can get everything else right and kind of like the IQ part of it doesn't actually matter as much.
Yeah, there's so many fun features in this. Like you can filter by
that drop in a bowl. That's the one I was talking about, by the way. Like if you click in like a partial cross, it creates that drop in a bowl.
Yeah,
so that's the note I have there. It's interesting at the higher levels because it's what I was calling a border shape, which you click in like the stamp pattern, and then that's part of the solution for spiral light where it overlaps the edges, whatever.
Man, this feature
right there, the top left, where it says this shape is formed from two rotated drop in a bowl shapes which overlap the play bounds. That's the piece that you add to the spider bite to turn it into a butterfly.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's
so many ways to heuristic your way through from the start to the solution. I've never thought about doing it like this. And if this were my save file, I'd be like, save, yes, or I would add it to my thingy. But
or that one down there in the bottom left was interesting too. This one I figured out real late. Like, oh, just click every lit tile and it turns into a reticle, because the border shapes of that, basically you light up every border tile.
Interesting.
If you click in a square. So just click in a square like in the middle. somewhere, like a 2x2. Right. So you light up every one, but it creates, since you already had 4 lit from the beginning, basically. Yeah. Then since it had 4 lit in the corner, you click on every one of them, so you're gonna toggle that whole, like, it's a rounded box basically. So if you have the 2 boxes in opposite corners and just click every one of them, then the filled 2x2 box section negates, and then you're just left with the quote border shape that I was talking about, which turns it into a reticle if you do both of those.
Yeah, neat. Gotcha.
So that's what I was talking about in terms of border shapes. Like if you just like click
Gotcha.
those, create these other, yeah.
Makes sense. Do you know what a magic shape is? It's what we call a magic shape, but slash is one of them. Where the click solution is exactly what the pattern looks like.
No.
There's
I know that concept, but I wasn't calling it that.
There's exactly.
I just wasn't calling it anything.
I don't know how many there are, but I think we found 3 or 4 magic shapes like total, which is interesting. And then there's some other people, some math majors and other people found out identity matrices, which, given a given pattern like this, there are.
Okay, that's interesting. You haven't even finished what you're saying. I already like. Okay, go ahead.
There are ways to click the board to where the pattern is exactly the same, even though you didn't make any redundant clicks. So this is in the bottom. You can see the click here. This is an identity matrix, and there's another one. There's another pattern where if I click, let me clear this. I think
that's an identity matrix, meaning
if you click that pattern to the grid will look exactly the same as when you started, like this. Oop, not that. Like this.
I see.
And the reason why that's important is you can apply an identity matrix to it to turn any inefficient click pattern solve into an efficient one by just doing multiple identity transforms. Some people approach it really mathy, and I thought that was fascinating. There's just so many cool. Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking like mathematical, like an actual identity matrix that you multiply to like not change a value, right? And they look kind of like a slash. Which when you said that you were like clicked in the slash and we're talking about identity matrices.
Yeah.
It's not exactly what you were saying.
Gotcha. But yeah, just so many cool things. I wanted to show you at some point I thought it'd be interesting to. What's up?
Scroll down through my notes there. I think there was one that I said the solution is literally to click literally every.
Let me type literally. Yeah. So you found this is
This is slash plus the zipper that I came up with. There was another one called zipper, but I renamed that. And for me, zipper was 2 slashes that were offset. So you basically have 2 stairs, and you just click every one of them. If you have 2 stairs like that, then you can click every one too. It's just that plus a slash.
I call this one magic wand. I'm like, it's because it's a magic shape, but it's also like a slash or a stick. I'm like, it's a magic wand. You just click every shape. Yeah, you found it. Yeah, very cool.
I was calling it band.
Band.
Yeah.
So at one point as a filter, I thought it'd be cool if people filtered notes based on how far they got in enlightenment or mastery. Like, if a person had high enlightenment but low mastery, you could be like, I want people to be in this range and this range. Like, what notes did they say here and here, or like I only want to get the notes of people who have really mastered the game and had a high enlightenment. Oh, hold on. I got to kill this.
Literally.
You literally have to kill that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like, one, that's cool because you're like, how did I used to think? Did I think about the puzzle smart? Was I dumb? Did I make assumptions? And you can filter for when your enlightenment or mastery were real low. And you're like, that's how I used to think. But you could do the same for other people. Like, they thought, and weird ways of thinking about the puzzle can spark you into new ways of thinking about it yourself, even if their mastery or enlightenment wasn't high. You can target very specific mindsets by adjusting the numbers.
Oh, it's interesting how this can have such a different solution for basically those 2 shapes there, right? That you can see on the left. Well, they're gone now.
or hours. Like how many hours of play? I want 24 to 30 hour notes only.
Don't have any from me.
Yeah. Just fun. I just thought these features were so neat. So they're just so fun to make.
It is. It's for the tricky thing is you're shooting in the dark a little bit because you can't see all the stats, right? And you're only kind of filtering for, well, at least for right now, it's one person. If you had lots of friends, then you could filter all of them.
Yeah. So this, I appreciate all the feedback. There was like, did you like any of the music? I had a friend compose it for me, and daily challenges. Each daily one has a different song for every day of the week, because I really want to make the daily part kind of a more fun thing to do.
Yeah, there was one. I don't remember when it played, but there was like every once
in
a
a
while
Thursday?
there'd be one that it played that I was like, oh, this one's really cool.
One of the
And
days
then
is
I
way
wouldn't-
better.
Yeah, I don't know when it happened, but yeah. So it'd be like you're sitting there, and like there was sometimes it'd be like, oh, this is kind of cool, and I click back, and it's like, dude, and I was like, whoa, it just stopped. Like, what did I do? But yeah, it's pretty cool. The whole like, I appreciated that different clicks in different spaces were different sounds. I would have guessed that would have helped me more than it did because I mostly learned things visually when I was doing this. I kind of noticed like, oh, these are really dissonant sounds sometimes because they don't, they're not in similar key or scale or mode or whatever, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
like the redundant clicks being a different sound, I didn't always pick up on either.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I know you're a musical person too.
Yeah.
I was always wondering who would pick up on those versus the visual elements.
Well, I could tell there was something there. I just didn't know how it was gonna help me explicitly. So I was like, I found other methods that were more effective.
Okay.
For me personally.
So now that I have you on the call, I will show you. Let's see. Am I streaming the? So let me kill this real quick. And so, a handful of years ago, I think it was like 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. Golly, it was before Jess. I met Jess. Oh wait.
Isn't that crazy how much things can change in just 5 years?
Yeah, I mean,
how sometimes it can feel like 5 years is a blink, and other times it's like, man, my entire life is different. That's crazy. I didn't even like. Yeah, 5 years ago for me was like a lot has happened since then, but the past 3 feels like more similar. It's just funny.
So we did a cool extra week featuring enLIGHTen on the Discord. And then I was so excited that I spun up a DLC modded version of enLIGHTen, and I called it enLIGHTen Gold. And this is for only people who had mastered enLIGHTen. So we just jumped back into it for a week or so. And
secret version.
And
whoa.
Let me mute it. But the whole trick to this is the whole point of enLIGHTen was to learn the art of learning. So sure, you can play a video game and you can master it and it can be like a job, but the whole point is to be able to apply that to other things. And one of the new game pluses ideas that I had for enLIGHTen that I basically built into this DLC mod was, like if you got to the end of mastery, you can be like, good job, student, but guess what? The true test begins now. And then it was going to kick you back into this game, and you would basically start with this as your game board, and essentially it gives you a new cursor.
A new cursor.
It's a dart as a default instead of a cross. See?
Oh.
And not only does it give you a new cursor, but when you click on puzzle mode, it was absolutely blank, and you had to make every single puzzle for yourself, which is pretty much a similar experience that I did when I was making the game. Like, there was no puzzle mode. I had to make those puzzles and arrange them to learn. So I basically built this mode. Everything you see here is an added shape. And then I took everyone else was playing that week, added their shapes. I added their shapes to my file and then made my file the friend to all them, so that when you click on the friends thing, not only did you get to see everyone's shape, but all their colors. And like, it was just so fun. Like we tried our best to like blitz through mastery of a in an unfamiliar territory. So like, this is like a Splatoon, I think. Well, you can't see the name there, but like some of them were squids, some of them are crabs. This is like a horseshoe crab. This is a sea turtle. I remember this one. And we were all sharing, and we were using the notes and the built-in features. Let me see if I can find Splatoon. No, let me see if I can find squid. Hold on. That's okay. Things break. But yeah, but this was a fun test, and I thought it was just really neat to.
It's also like the mindset you have to be in while you're making the thing too, and it's like, hey, oftentimes you don't get to actually explore that side of it much when you're playing games like these. You just solve the puzzles that were made, and it's like, no, but now like make some stuff, because that's in the oh shoot, what is it? What was it? Bloom's taxonomy, is that what it is?
Sure. Yeah, the triangle.
Pyramid.
Yeah, it's right here somewhere.
Yeah.
It's right,
Somewhere.
where did I put that? Learning model. Bloom's right here.
Yeah. So at the peak of the pyramid, the smallest point is create, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, you got through all this like apply, analyze, evaluate, but most games that have the opportunity to have that much depth with it, right, don't have a create section.
So this was fun.
And this is like so elegant to be and simple to be able to create something in, because it's just a 5x5 grid where you toggle things.
Oh yeah, yeah. The thoughts that we made, like look at the. I keep trying to. Hold on. The dots right here, the dot spread and grabbing the shapes of other. Blue is Marcus. I don't remember everyone's colors, unfortunately.
Magnet. Yeah.
But people had tips, methods, shapes, questions, and we would all just dogpile it together, and we were sharing and learning communally, like in this really cool way, because we had all mastered the game, so we were familiar with how all this worked.
Yeah, that's cool.
The Venn sorter populates automatically. Like all these things, I can't believe how robust it didn't actually utterly fall apart. But these were all the hashtags we shared between us. It was a lot of fun. But yeah,
for the most part, you like most of the UI issues are just related to refreshing. Yeah, well, and misspelling, but yeah, refreshing's hard. Like state management's hard.
Man,
it is.
So this a neat. This was like such a fun idea for New Game Plus, and I just wanted to show you that. The other thing was, the other option for New Game Plus was basically you restart the game of normal enlightened supposedly or whatever, and the whole point is to reach mastery. Like, if you already reached enlightenment, that's a mental thing, so you don't need to prove that again. The whole thing was to reach mastery with either a new cursor or the existing cursor, but you cannot make a single click in the grid.
Meaning you click outside the grid?
Nope. So I built this tool.
Oh.
So this is not in the version that you played, but this is in the version that came just after Enlighten 8, which I didn't. It's not as widely distributed, but I'll show you this. Check out. Oh, man. Well, check out Hidden Shapes. I updated it to where it has clickable cycles. It shows you how many are in, and then it cycles through all the options to show you where they are. And no matter what you like, that's a dogtail. This is a 7. This is a small 3, or a small. This is an elongated fish tail. Like, people had a really hard time seeing the shapes, and they're like, I wish I could just light them up. I'm like, fine. And I like went back and like programmed it, but it never got the feature to them in time.
Yeah, reset that real quick and just like click 2 like diagonally from each other.
2 like this?
Sorry, like somewhere in the middle. Click like hold on, like reset it,
Hmm.
reset it,
Oh, two
and like
left
yeah, click
clicks
with your dart. Yeah, like there, and then above to the right,
above
or to the bottom left,
bottom
either one.
right
Probably bottom left.
right here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So okay, so that's interesting because this is I would call this like flower hinge.
Mhm.
Because you basically the part that's across, you click. It's an offset reticle is
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
another way to think about it. If it's so that actually wouldn't be solvable quite the same way because the top one is not touching an edge.
Mhm.
But that when you just did that, I was like, oh, that duh, because like the when it's in a corner,
Yeah.
the dart, which is what you're painting with, is like you
Cut
click a
off.
diagonal,
Yeah.
right? And so that's solvable by clicking a diagonal. So the way that you solve this one is by clicking the four that are bordering like the
Mhm.
center. And so it's like, oh yeah, the dart is by clicking those two diagonals. So of course, if you stack them on two on top of each other, it's creating this shape.
Yeah.
Of course, right?
Yep.
That only works if they're because it'd actually be a butterfly and not a dart if it wasn't bordering an
Mhm.
edge.
Mhm.
But since it is bordering an edge, like you would actually that would become solvable as the combination of the two shapes if you basically shifted the whole thing up one tile. Anyway, this is you did that and I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, you did that and I was like, whoa, yeah,
Your brain lit
of
up.
course, yeah.
So that was a cool update to hidden shapes, but this is a feature.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
you couldn't even see it with that level of understanding without knowing like, oh, you click these two places to make a dart, and then these other shapes you click these places, and then you're like seeing the layers of clicks, right, and not necessarily just the shapes themselves. Um, all the time. You could do it sometimes,
Yeah.
but you get what I'm saying.
The other. So this is how you play the game without making a single click. I had built this entire
Mm,
visual scripting system into the game, and it was when I told you before we looked at the method maker. I'm like, that's a trash system. I completely replaced it. I replaced it with
mm,
this, and
nah.
this is way too convoluted, and nobody got to play with it. But the idea was, you create little heuristics that are actual like programmable blocks, and the game can run through them and apply any of your heuristics programmatically, and then you can share them with people and kind of play like they play because you can just click a button and it plays a board for you. So it's basically like
Mm.
you can name a thing like this is called Josh 2.0. You put a description here. This is a test. You
This test.
yeah, this is test. This a test. You add a node, and the first node you set down was supposed to be the goal condition. So I blanked out all the ones that you can't select and only allow you to select either scan for a known pattern, scan for hidden patterns, check the cell state of a cell, find a custom pattern, or is it symmetrical or is it the board?
Oh,
Is the board
so
solved?
all those are implemented
Yeah,
with algorithms.
yeah.
Okay.
So like, let's
You
say
just click it.
when the board is solved, this whole algorithm will shut down and be like mission complete. But then once you do that, you can start adding any nodes you want, and you can be in these nodes range from click, like applying a click, adjusting your click, punching out a pattern, punching in a pattern, applying multiple clicks. You can do a heat map. You target the coldest cell, the hottest cell. You can score the board based on criteria. I built all these things so that no matter what you could think of, like however you think, is a way to program it into these little chunks. And you were essentially supposed to build a very simple program and then make it more complex by adding heuristics to it and play the entire game conceptually rather than clicky, 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 clicky. And it was forcing you to think with words, with concepts, and in a somewhat logical way, shuffling around whole heuristics rather than just clicking until you get bored or whatever. That was like
Mm.
another idea for the new game plus, and we never really got to. Nobody really ever got to play around too much with that system.
Yeah, but this is the thing that's really cool that you can only do if you spent enough time with the other stuff.
Yeah, it's
Um, but it's also like part of the reason it's also really interesting is that you can compare stats with other people
Yeah.
and see what other people's answers are, because it would lose a lot of a lot of what am I trying to say? It feel like there would be a lot missing if you couldn't see that, right? So just like I was looking at my stats, right, and like, okay, here's some stats, that's cool.
Hmm.
And you were like, oh, here's how your stats compare to everybody else. So they don't always have this like gradual
Yeah.
tick here. Sometimes people will like have other things like taking notes or using tools, and it results in more spikes like
Hmm.
in different places. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Hmm.
So that was kind of neat. So
I couldn't
yeah.
I couldn't show you
Although
the.
theoretically, you could, like, if you were gonna release this thing to a wider audience eventually, you could show like population
Yeah.
scores,
Yeah.
things like that. You wouldn't necessarily have to have friends. You could have it filterable by both
Yeah.
if you wanted to. Like, well, also like it's a bit of a programming feat, but
So this is I couldn't show you live the system working because I think that one's a little buggy, but at one point I actually made a video of it working, and not only can you make heuristics, but inside the rules you can specify, given X condition, if the board meets that condition, swap to an entire heuristical, a whole other program script. You can swap over to it.
wow.
So you can be like, run this until this happens, then run this until this happens, and then run this. And you can just basically have an entire game plan, an entire player's play style encoded, and then like hand it to somebody.
You literally like scripted an AI
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was so fun.
People talk about AIs now like they're all like LLMs and things like that, but like no, there's a lot of types of AIs, and this literally like this is
And they was supposed to be all human readable.
a decision tree.
Or,
Yeah.
and like I wanted somebody to read down the list and be like, count the lights. I can count the lights. 1, 2, 3. Pick the big. Like I wanted people to realize that the fancy thing the computer can do like really fast. There's nothing fancy about it. and if you can read the chunk, you can do it yourself. I really wanted to help people like realize that.
Yeah. Computers aren't actually like smart, they're just fast.
Yeah. Man, you don't even know. Like this was so I've played with this tool and done so many crazy things. Like I built a program that said, if you ever find a shape, I even have feedback nodes. Play this sound. When you play this sound, you can even control the scroll wheel. It said make a bookmark at this turn on the scroll wheel. Once you make a bookmark, randomly click in the board 5 clicks forward. If you don't find another shape that's a known pattern, rewind 5 clicks. 5 click random again. Rewind 5 clicks. 5 click until you find another shape, and then repeat the whole thing. And then I hit run and I walked away. And then across the room, I'm like, ding dong. I'm like, yep. It found another one. Ding dong. It found another one, and I'm just like listening to the algorithm work, and I'm just like imagining in my head what could be going on the screen. I've made so many crazy methods.
That's literally how some people were doing it, right? People who tend to do more random clicks. It's like, let me click and see what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, rewind. Try again. Like,
Yeah. Or I made another one where it said, if you find a known shape, scramble it, and then play a sound. And then when I hear the sound, I walk over like, what the heck was this? Oh. And then I like look at it and go, it must be that. And I rewind. Yep. And then I click play again, and I walk across the room. There's just so many fun things to do once you've reached. I think mastery is just unlike anything else. It's so fun. Cause
that is, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, that is, like, really impressive to have written that and it works, and then claim to, like, well, I'm not a programmer, right? Like, like, maybe, but also that's hard to do, especially in all this, and not have it, like, fall apart, right?
Yeah.
And to add it to existing systems.
Yeah, it was fun. And
it's a complex thing. It's pretty. I bet that took a while though.
So, I was working at Gunfire Games when I came up with this. Wanted to do this method maker.
Oh, I didn't realize you worked at Gunfire.
Yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And then I thought I was at work, so I'm like, well, I want to save it to the weekend to do it. And I thought about it so much, it got to that point where you start to get antsy because you feel yourself like losing grips on all the things that you can hold in your head. So
yeah.
I took notes, And as soon as freaking 6 o'clock Friday evening, I went home, programmed straight till Sunday evening. Like
Mm-hmm.
that whole weekend was a blur, and I hit compile and run. I only had 3 bugs for like 24 hours plus of coding, and this is the system that came out of it. I had 3 bugs, and that was the most
Well,
impressive thing I've ever done programming wise. Because it was all so clear. I'm like, I know exactly what I need to do. I just need to sit down and do it. It was so cool. Anyway, that's a fun. The last.
that's I do that. I do that kind of thing where I like we'll have something I'm working on. Whether sometimes we work things, sometimes it'll be personal things. It just depends on the week what I'm thinking of the most, right? And like I will spend a lot of time. There's people probably see me in the break room all the time. They're like, "Is he even working?" Like I see him in here all the time. It's like, no, I'm. If you stare at the screen, you just kind of sometimes do something automatically, and I'm like, no, I walk around and I'm thinking while I'm doing that, basically.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I decided what I was going to do. Or I'll just like go for a walk. And the first 5 minutes of the walk is, it's hot out here.
Hmm.
I was good to stretch my legs. And the last 5 minutes is like, what if I tried this? Maybe
Yeah.
this thing could be that way. Maybe it could be whatever. I heard someone say once that uh, I think it was Charles Darwin, whenever he was coming up with on the origin of species, and he was trying to write that out and come up with some ideas and organize them all. He would just go on really long walks
Yep.
to like get the blood flowing and think, and so he wouldn't have to count how many laps that he did
Hmm.
around the little trail or whatever. He would just stack up rocks, and every time he came around, he would kick one of them off because that way he didn't have to store the lap count in his working memory. And like when he kicked the last one off, he was like, "All right, I'm done with my walk."
Neat. Neat.
Like, that's funny.
Um, do you know that Overwatch tool that I told you also sucked?
Do I know
It was
Do maybe not.
it's a
What does it do?
it was a tool on the side, but it was the least used tool out of all the tools in enLIGHTen. But it was all this.
I clicked it and I didn't know what it
It
did.
was all the stuff Gritcher was thinking. So when you play,
Oh,
when you're going fast, you can see like the little notes going fast, fast,
oh
faster.
right.
And it was just like, oh, it's kind of neat that you can see what he's thinking, but it didn't do much. So
Yeah, yeah.
the revised system, I took the same scripting system I made and allow you to create your own Overwatch, which is basically every time you click in the grid, it runs the script no matter what you program in it. And that means you can program it to play a sound when there's too many lights. You can play a sound when there's too few lights. You can make it play a sound when there's too many clicks. You can make it play a sound when there's X amount of hidden shapes. You can make it play a sound when you're
Oh,
X away
so it's
from a
like
known shape.
tell
Yeah,
me when you notice these patterns. Help me break out
yeah,
of my. Yeah,
yeah,
that's neat.
and you can make as many different Overwatches as the scripting system allows. So I did some experiments with that too, where I used it. That means you can click as fast as you want, but the Overwatch is as fast as you are. And I was like, oh, this is another cool way to basically get eyes on your play without having someone stand over your shoulder and be like, this is boring. What game is
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with the Overwatch tool was just that, like it would say, "Oh, you clicked a lot, or you slowed down, or you this," and I'm like, a lot of the times I was like, "Yeah, I know, I did because I thought I knew how to solve this," and then I click, 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 oh crap, wait a minute, that didn't work the way I wanted to. Now I gotta look at it for a second, and
Hmm.
it's like I know I slowed down because I got stuck. Like I need to know that I slowed down, you know?
Yeah, yeah. The Overwatch was one of the earliest tools I made, and it's crude.
Yeah,
But no, I appreciate you taking the look. Um, it's just so many. There's so many cool things, and it's just so hard to talk to people about what's cool about learning, their different methods, and like
you just
even
gotta know how to do it.
abstract theories and even just basic experiences. A lot of people don't have a lot to say, so it's always nice to meet another master. And I'm glad you enjoyed the game enough to push through all the bugs and the other.
Yeah, for sure.
And the,
Like it was for for the most part, right? It was pretty stable.
mm,
You know, there were bugs. The biggest thing is like just finickiness in the UI
yeah.
and like text overlapping and sometimes not being readable, or like
So hard.
you click something and it doesn't give you
Yeah.
feedback or it doesn't refresh, right? So most of the problems were related to like not refreshing or like keyboard focus is weird.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I would go to rename a puzzle, I would the first time I would go to rename it, it wouldn't read the keyboard input, and then I would back out, and then you go to rename it again. But then if you like back up all the way to the first character or the 0th character and start typing, it wouldn't register either. So you had to like go to rename,
Mm-hmm.
cancel out of it, rename again, and then you have to do backspace a couple times and then hit something on the keyboard so it registers at least one key press, and then you could back it all out and then name it. Like, so there's like some weird stuff like that. But
Yeah.
you know, it was pretty much all to do with the UI,
Mm-hmm.
or like sometimes scroll wheel for history states would stop working in one direction,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but for the most part, I mean, um, stateful UI is always hard to work with. So there's like, if you hadn't learned how to mitigate some of those problems, you're gonna run into them.
Yeah.
Everybody does, which is why, like I was telling you a couple weeks ago, like programmers hate UI because they almost always have to be stateful, and like if you can avoid stateful anything, then you don't have to deal with all the pitfalls of
Mm-hmm.
like what if it doesn't refresh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's it is a challenge. uh, there's also, well, it didn't want to go into full screen all the time. That was another thing.
Yeah.
Are we just making a list now?
Yeah. Only if you want to. It's been so many years.
But the core game didn't really have any issues or anything. The biggest thing was just understanding, like, you were like, oh, this is how this tool works. I'm like, oh, okay, that would be useful. Or I was like, man, I wish this had something like, wait a minute. Wait a minute, there, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Neat.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
All right, signing off.